some story to tell. Actually, it's just one story, and this is my great opportunity to get back at my boss for making me do this task, right? I'm going to talk about her. So, shh. And this is framed in, if you recall Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, then I'd like to use that framework today in this story with you, storytelling with you, as I tell our sheroes journey. And I'd like to start by sharing with you that as I was lining up in the grocery before New Year, this magazine caught my attention on the shelf. The magazine by Fortune group of companies that features, I think, 50 most powerful women CEOs in the world. Who among you have read it? Okay, no one, okay. But I bought a copy because I was curious. In my mind, I asked the question, what makes these women the all-powerful, globally recognized women in the world? What made them distinct as women CEOs? So I bought a copy, and while queuing, I went over the pages and found out these were the metrics by which they were chosen to be considered as the world's powerful global CEOs, women CEOs. First, financials. So they're talking about huge billions of dollars of profits and revenue. And there's a portion dedicated to startups where women were also recognized for having radically increased the valuation of the startup enterprises. Second was their ability to manage people, which Dr. J also mentioned in his talk earlier. And there are two kinds of people they relate to. One are their internal employees, and the second aspect has to do with customers. And third was their consistent creativity to innovate, to do something new, to find new ways of doing things, like the lady from Australia who founded Canva because she was so disappointed and frustrated with how bad the aesthetics are when we do PowerPoint presentations. In all of their stories, their creative, innovative spirit fueled corporate growth and team growth. And finally, what I appreciated the most was that there was also an evident shared passion to continue conversations around the concern of sustainability, in particular, of course, the ESG framework, the economic impact, the social impact, and the way corporations are run, the governance impact. Dr. J mentioned that in his studies, or some of the studies, the literature points out that women managers and leaders actually prove to be more effective, productive, because maybe of the innate DNA of women leaders. And I said the ESG impact was something that I truly appreciated because it is something that in our context is also evident and we value. Dr. J, in his talk, talked about the corporate setup, the corporate world. And when I looked at the parameters for the most powerful women CEOs, some of the metrics would not be commensurate to what we value in our context. And that context is public sector. That is public service. So in the context of civil or public service, how are we able to transform our leadership journey into being managers and leaders to becoming the hero, the shero that we were destined to become? In our context, okay, the Department of Migrant Workers is a one-year-old department. It is, well, new and not so new because we are a merged department from various agencies. There's one slide I put together for your appreciation. But we are fortunate to not be compelled to run after profits and revenue because the government, you Filipinos who are here, pay our salaries and our operations with your taxes. We are fortunate that for this year, Congress gave us 15.896 billion pesos. And 1.2 billion of that supports repatriation and legal assistance and other forms of humanitarian assistance to our migrant workers around the world. In terms of people, we were given 1,728 new positions. So those of you who are thinking of a career shift and you want to increase the level of insanity that you have, but also increase the level of fulfillment as Filipinos, we have about 958 vacant positions for fill-up. And we are poised to do that process at the end of this month. Our customer base includes that relative of Rebecca and Richard, whom we brought home from the Middle East. And that's about 2 to 3 million every year, with a stock number of about 8 to 10 million, right, Jane? Yeah, thereabouts. So that's the huge customer base that we manage. And while Richard shared that quite not so optimistic story, but the narrative of our migrant workers is also replete with positive ones, of success transformative stories. When I was judging for the 10 Outstanding Young Men Search last year, one of my favorite nominees is a female overseas worker in Dubai who hails from Davao, and she's a single mother and made a name for herself, having put up her own photography and videography business. And she's quite big in Dubai. And that's a narrative that's hardly told because mainstream media would like sexier stories of failures and abuse and disappointments rather than the positive stories like Rebecca's. Because I suppose that we all know her story from being made, M-I-A-D, to a self-made, M-A-D-E, CEO and woman leader that she is. A round of applause for a good sister in this journey. Creative innovations is something that our secretary has repeatedly underscored among the team values. And of course, we are concerned with ESG impact, with climate change at the forefront of the agenda being talked about as we formulate our new policies, our programs for our overseas workers. Dr. J talked about 5 Ps, and I have about 5 Cs to summarize how Secretary Toots is the shero leader that she is to this team and the communities of overseas workers around the world. The first C is her power of courage. A little more than a year before her appointment was announced, she actually was diagnosed with cancer. And even when she was spoken to by the president, she did not readily say yes. For a lot of people who want power, which is vested in the position, you would readily say yes. But she said, let me think through it because I know the enormity of the task and the challenges ahead. But that courage to say yes, I suppose, comes from her DNA. Her late father, Blas Ople, being one of our famous statesmen, and who founded the Philippine Overseas Employment Authority, becoming, of course, the leader in overseas migration management. I think that made it natural for her to say yes. Because prior to this offer to head the Department of Migrant Workers, she was actually the CEO, president of the Blas Ople Policy Center, which was doing a lot of advocacy work, a lot of policy work and research to benefit our overseas workers. But even when she took on the job in July last year, every 3 months, she still goes through her PET scan. And I would sometimes personally remind her, like, Sec, can you take a rest? Because stress is not something that goes well with cancer. At one time, she was in New York, and she was asking for data because she had emergency meetings scheduled. And I was telling her, Sec, you can take a nap. And then when you wake up, the data will be sent to you. But she said, no, I cannot do that. Because you know, Tonette, we both have been trained by our bosses before where you don't really sleep until everything is done. But I said, but you know, you need to sleep. And stress is like the nemesis of cancer. But that's not how she's made up. A woman of great courage. She said yes, knowing fully well, with eyes wide open, the challenges that lay before her. This is a new department, and while the programs may not be entirely new, but the challenges as we know them now, as we speak, are evolving, emerging, and they continue to change every day. There could be a war breakout somewhere, there's climate change challenges in some parts of the world, and they affect our migrant workers. In Taiwan, we check, in Korea, we check, do they have bomb shelters in Israel? Do they have enough food supply in this part of the world where there's flooding? And all sorts of concerns for our migrant workers. But she was brave enough to say yes. In her New Year's message last January, she said this one thing as an appeal to everybody in the department. Toots Ople said, let us help change lives for the better. Going back to Dr. J's 5 Ps, if you ask me, Dr. J, I would start with your third P, which is purpose. Because I think as an effective woman visionary, everything begins with the end in mind. What is the purpose that you are fulfilling in the world? And Sec Toots exactly knows that. Her purpose for saying yes was to consistently and continuously change the lives, not just of our OFWs, but the members of our team at the Department of Migrant Workers, for the better. Her ability to change, to lead change, to make an impact for the others, is actually one's rock of support as we go through the transformation journey of the Department of Migrant Workers. As I mentioned, we are new, but not so new, because structurally, we have changed the Philippine Overseas Employment Administration, which was the focal agency for doing licensing and regulation and adjudication of claims of workers. And we are also taking under our umbrella the International Social Service Office of the Department of Social Welfare. So we are subsuming social welfare officers from that department. Then we have the National Reintegration Center for OFWs, which manages the full cycle, expected to manage a full cycle national reintegration program. We are now managing our labor attaché corps. We have 40 migrant worker offices around the world. So those of you who want to work abroad for the government, this is where you can go. We have administrative staff, labor attachés, assistant labor attachés posted right now in 40 countries around the world. And we are expanding with 4 countries this year and more as mandated by the law in the years to come. Then we also have under our wing the National Maritime Polytechnic, which is directly and administratively supervised by our Assistant Secretary Jerome Pampolina here. So these current discussions on EMSA, the way our seafarers are certified, whether they meet the standard qualifications for skills across Europe and as set by world certification bodies, is something that our department is also very concerned about. So the DMW structurally is changing, but the greater, more, I should say, the challenge that really keeps us awake at night is not just the structural physical change, but the mindset change that ought to come with it. The heart change, which ideally should go together, because there's a lot of what Dr. J said, attitude that needs to be changed. And you can imagine the challenge of putting together 5 different sets of culture, of values from different organizations now being housed in one structure. So it's quite exciting, Dr. J. You should come and visit us in the department. Your colleague Scott, whom I met, said you'll be here for like a 2-week stay. So we hope to welcome you before you leave. Secretary Tut's desire to lead change in the lives of many others for the better is driven by this vision, which is not only in the law, but also part of how she crafted the destination for us as a team. So we are, she said, the exclusive home of overseas Filipino workers in government. And not just them, but we're also catering and looking after their families. We are here to protect their rights, promote their welfare, and unleash their potential to fulfill their destiny as co-architects of national economic development. Quite a lot of words, but we are committed to fulfill this mandate. And part of that mandate is to be able to roll out continuous lifelong training and skills training for our workers. We do not want them to remain migrant workers all their lives. We want overseas migration to be a choice. They are leaving because they want to. They are leaving because they can, not because they cannot stay here for lack of opportunities. And this is an effort and endeavor that requires the whole of society approach. This is not just government's sole primary responsibility. We need you. We need all of you in this effort. Our mission, talking about purpose, is that we are committed to empower our customer base, our migrant workers, with our ongoing initiative to transform our processes, our services, enabled by digital technologies, and we are also committed to contribute to the ease of doing business in terms of serving the needs of our overseas workers. As I mentioned, we are committed to manage a national reintegration program, and this is where we are knocking on your doors for partnerships. If you have corporate social responsibility programs which you think can find a place in helping improve the lives of the children of OFWs, their communities, the families, the women left behind by male seafarers, or the husbands left behind by teachers, by caregivers who are working elsewhere, then we have our doors open for you for partnerships. The second C is the power of cause. And I borrow Jose Rizal, our national hero, Dr. J. and Scott, when he said that it is a useless life that is not consecrated to a great ideal. It is like a stone wasted on a field without becoming a part of any edifice. So this is like the cathedral building that you said earlier on. And this commitment to a cause, not minding the cost, because personally for Secretary Toots, that cost is actually her health. She has hardly slept. I know she won't hear this naman, diba? So let me talk behind her back. She hardly sleeps. Among all the members of the management team, I think she's the one with the longest waking hours. And now that she travels also a lot, doing negotiations, meeting Filipino communities, you can imagine how it whacks her body clock. But she does not mind. This brings me back to my favorite prayer, the prayer for generosity. I think she exemplifies that commitment to that cause. Do you know that prayer? No? Okay. Dearest Lord, teach me to be generous. Teach me to serve you as I should. To serve and not to count the cost. To fight and not to heed the wounds. To toil and not to seek for rest. To labor and ask not for rewards, save that of knowing that I do your most holy will. Richard, you should pay me because I'm a professional singer. That part had a fee. I forgot to mention. I'm just joking. But that prayer exemplifies the commitment to cause of our Secretary Toots. Serving without cost, not minding how much it really costs, and just being fully committed to the cause of our migrant workers. She also has achieved that delicate skill to balance the competing interests and demands. On one hand, she is so heavy on really focused on protecting our migrant workers, but at the same time, fully cognizant that there is a supply side of it, there's a business side to it that we also need to manage because we're part of a growing global economy. The programs that we have are quite aligned in that vision and commitment to cause. They are meant to rescue workers, to renew our own and their capacities, to reform our own processes. That's why I put 3 R's there. To rescue, to renew, and reform. We have a 24-hour. There are some people in our team who don't sleep, ladies and gentlemen. 24/7, no weekends. They are there in the building or in their houses, attending to calls of distressed OFWs, working on their repatriation, attending to their questions, responding to their needs. That's managed by our One Repatriation Command Center in partnership with the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration. As I mentioned, we have a digitalization effort. We're doing this in partnership with private sector, PLDT, SMART, Globe, the Department of ICT. And we continue to renegotiate bilateral labor agreements with various host destinations. We've had one very successful negotiation with the KSA, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, last year. And this has actually, brought a lot of success for us, among many other countries claiming for unpaid salaries of workers when a lot of companies closed down in the Middle East. The Prince, last year, told our president, I will personally pay for those unpaid salaries. Yes. Aren't you supposed to applaud at this point? Yes. Yes. So all our workers who have been retrenched are getting paid by no less than the Prince himself. The President, personally, is quite committed to helping not just the OFWs and the spouses, but also the families. It's a family-centered initiative with heavy focus on the kids, on the children of OFWs, because we know what happens, especially when the mothers are the ones who are out. So we have kid-centered initiatives. If you, Dr. J, and Scott, I think he stepped out, are keen on pursuing a partnership because together we can change the world for these families by having programs, that help them. A lot of them have trauma. A lot of them are survivors also of violence. So this is one area where you can really make a dent in their lives. We have children's clubs organized across the country. We have also family circles organized around the country. And we have programs like introducing them to music and the arts, help teach them financial literacy because we want them to have an attitude and that habit of saving. And this cause for our protection of workers is something Secretary Toots Ople is fully committed to. In all of her interviews, she consistently says that there's no let-up in our campaign. And this is at the core of bilateral labor negotiations that we do in various countries. It's a constant provision in our agreements. As I mentioned, we have a full-cycle national reintegration program so that our OFWs who have decided to come home for good will really find meaningful, productive, sustainable livelihood and economic opportunities that can sustain their economic needs. We, of course, provide scholarships for the children of our workers. Last December 30, during Jose Rizal's day, the President handed out packages of gifts for them. And I think 100% of those who came are actually scholars who graduated with honors from various universities. So we were actually talking about recruiting them to the department because to begin with, their hearts obviously are in the right places. Then we have a very strong anti-illegal recruitment in partnership with the Philippine National Police, the National Bureau of Investigation, and other law enforcement agencies. We are also forging partnerships with local government units because, as we mentioned, this is something that we cannot do alone by ourselves. And last year, we opened an overseas Filipino worker hospital. If you have time, we can take you to Mabalacat, Pampanga. It's about 1 hour and a half drive from here. And this was built with the collaboration of private sector and government. The Bloomberry Foundation built the hospital. The government of Pampanga donated the lot, and several other government agencies pulled together funds for the procurement of supplies, the payment of salaries of the nurses. As I speak, we are in the process of institutionalizing support for the OFW hospital. And this is in Mabalacat, but because of this initiative, the policymakers have agreed to have a parallel effort of providing access to medical and health services by creating OFW wards in existing tertiary public hospitals across the country, so that access to medical and health services will also be guaranteed wherever our OFWs are. The third C, power of Toots Ople, is the power of consistent humility. She is a leader who listens. If you meet her, I'm sure this will be her first words to you. Number one, "Uy, please help us." Second, "Can we go to you because we want to listen and find out how you and us can work together." Right, Jerome? Because Assistant Secretary Jerome Alcantara also functions as her chief of staff. So he's the one who has worked longest with her in that very tight relationship. But this is the kind of humble woman that she is. She is constantly willing to listen. And as I said, even when she was offered the position, she did not readily say yes because she's just after the authority or position. But she said, "I'm doing this with open eyes, consulting people who matter to her," because she was aware of the enormity of the task and the challenges involved. That enormous task, and I put "our," is not hers alone. Because when our migrant workers succeed, we also continue to succeed as a country. As noted by Richard, even last year, through 2 years of the pandemic, we've received about $30 billion worth of remittances from migrant workers across the world. You can see that our enormous task in managing migrant workers, because this is the Women's Summit of HSEO, you can see that the number of female workers continues to grow, particularly in the land-based sector. So the last light blue female deployment, if you see, that's more than half of male workers deployed last year alone. And particularly for land-based workers, the red portion constitutes female workers. So we see a continuing trend of feminization of the workforce. And you know the consequence of that. We have more households in the Philippines with no light in the family, in the house. Because as we say, the women, the mothers, are the ilaw ng tahanan. You can see, probably imagine the social cost of this increasing feminization trend of migration. But as I mentioned, fortunately, this is not the sole personal responsibility of Secretary Toots Ople. This is our collective accountability as Filipinos. The next C, which is her power, is the power of communication. We benefit from Sec Toots being a communicator. She's a writer. And so the power of her words is something that we have benefited from in terms of gaining very positive media coverage for the Department of Migrant Workers. That notion of the DMW being developed and evolving into the home, the exclusive home for our OFWs in government, those words were her. And she always reminds us to not be afraid, to be simple, to use short sentences, but to be sincere and genuine in all of this. And if you've met her, who among you have met her personally? No one. Okay. I'll make sure, Rebecca, that she appears personally in the next HSCU event, because that power of communication that lies beneath her words is actually fueled by her impeccable calmness. So she is the epitome of chill. Diba? Kalma lang. Oo, kalma lang. Relax lang. She's always calm. And of course, she is a very creative leader. And that power of creativity is driven or guided by the vision that she has set for the team. That's the compass. But the inner compass that also guides her and us is that heart there on the second picture. And the value that we have all committed ourselves to, one of the 5 values that we have agreed as a team, is the value of compassion. While the vision is our compass, compassion is the inner compass that guides our day-to-day service to our migrant workers. I end here. So what are the 5 C's? Okay? Because you made them recall the 5 P's. So what are the 5 C's? Which are the true power of this woman hero, the heroine, in our context of the Department of Migrant Workers. First C, courage. Second C, cause. Third C, consistent humility. The fourth C, communication. And the fifth C is creativity. Thank you very much. I end here. And by the way, I'm not done. So I end here to borrow this phrase because we're talking about migration and overseas employment. So this is necessary to travel. So just a quick quiz with you. The journey of 1,000,000 miles begins with a single step. No. The journey of 1,000,000 miles begins with, a fantastic pair of shoes. And before you are the 6 pair of action shoes, which is the bonus. They're the bonus. They're not mine. The blue navy, the white, what do you call that? Rubber shoes, yeah, which is casual and cool. The formal leather, the orange gumboots, I like that. The pink slippers, and the purple boots. You have to do homework on what they're for and what the colors represent. I chose to wear, can you see my shoes? Yeah. It's an engineered black shoes. It's formal in color. There's mystery in the black, and power in the black, sometimes evil in the black. But the creativity that went into the shoes is something I pay tribute to. But the best thing about it is that it's fantastic because you can walk on it, run on it, and think on it. But most of all, serve on it. I want you to look at the shoes you're wearing today. And the men will be bored because they usually just wear the formal leather shoes. But I noticed Dr. J was wearing a white pair of rubber shoes for running, for casual. What pair of shoes are you wearing today? Huh? Black hardy, white strappy. I saw one shimmering shoes there earlier, and a pink one, So pink is so feminine. So maybe you unconsciously chose the pair of shoes you're wearing today. But then what I want you to do, leaving this conversation this morning, is to consciously make a decision what shoes you wear when you go to work, when you hit the road. Because that's going to take you the sheroes journey you're all destined to fulfill. Maraming salamat.